Oh my goodness. Joe Rogan just said he's starting to feel suspicious about the Charlie Kirk case, all because of what a few body language experts discovered about that viral hug between Erika Kirk and JD Vance. You've probably seen that moment by now. Erika on stage, JD Vance walking up, and that short hug that sent the internet into a frenzy. Everyone had an opinion about it, some saying it was innocent, others insisting it crossed a line. But now, 3 professional body language experts have analyzed every single second of that moment, and what they found completely changes how people see it. Even Joe Rogan said the experts' breakdown made him question what's really going on. So here's what happened. The hug took place on October 29th at a Turning Point USA event. Erika Kirk was on stage to introduce JD Vance, who was there to give a speech. But this wasn't just any event. This was only a few weeks after her husband, Charlie Kirk, passed away on September 10th. She was still grieving, still processing that loss. Before JD even came on stage, Erika said something that made people raise their eyebrows. She told the audience that no one could ever replace her husband, but that JD reminded her a lot of him. That one line had people whispering, and then came the hug. JD walked out, they embraced, and the internet exploded. But here's the thing, most of the people who joined the debate never actually watched the video. They reacted to 2 specific photos that started spreading everywhere online. In those pictures, you can clearly see Erika's hand on the back of JD's head, and that single image was enough to fuel thousands of heated arguments and conspiracy posts. But professional analysts don't rely on still photos. They focus on the full movement, timing, and context, the things a frozen frame can't show. When they reviewed the footage, everything looked completely different. Jesus Enrique Rosas, who's known as the body language guy, said something really important. Context changes everything. He explained that when people are grieving, they often seek comfort through touch. A brief hug can be an emotional release, not a romantic gesture. He also pointed out that Erika's body language showed sadness and vulnerability, not flirtation or excitement. Her movements were slow and sincere. JD, on the other hand, stayed composed. His posture remained formal, his hands respectful, and there was no sign of lingering physical contact. Another expert noted that the hug lasted only a few seconds, and both of them maintained public decorum throughout. There were no romantic signals, no inappropriate gestures, just a brief human moment between 2 people on a stage. But because of how social media works, those few seconds turned into a storm of assumptions and viral posts. Joe Rogan reacted to this after watching the analysis and said it made him rethink how fast people jump to conclusions online. He said the experts' breakdown showed just how easily a single moment can be taken out of context and turned into a completely different story. And honestly, that's the most interesting part of this whole thing. Not the hug itself, but how it shows the power of perception. A short, 3-second embrace between 2 people, one of them grieving, one showing support, turned into a massive controversy. But when you slow things down, look at the full picture, and listen to the professionals, what you see isn't scandal or secrets. It's empathy. It's grief. It's a reminder that sometimes what we think we see online isn't what's really happening. So the next time something goes viral, maybe take a moment before judging. Because as Joe Rogan just realized, not everything trending online is what it seems.
We're sharing these 2 pictures, and again, this is a basic principle not only in the body language guy, but for life. When you're going to analyze anything, if you want to analyze the behavior or the body language of any person, if you have access to video, it's much better to go for the video itself.
He explained that the entire controversy blew up because people were sharing still photos instead of watching the actual video. And honestly, that makes sense. It's easier to post a single picture on Twitter or Instagram than to share a full clip. But that's also the problem. When you freeze one split second in time, it can make something look way more dramatic than it really was. Those 2 photos that went viral made it seem like Erika was holding JD's head for an awkwardly long time, like it was this drawn-out, emotional moment. But when you watch the full footage, you realize the hug lasted less than 3 seconds. 3 seconds. That's barely enough time to blink. Even though it was that short, there was still something in those few seconds that caught the attention of body language experts. And I'm not talking about one random YouTuber with an opinion. Several professionals all noticed the same subtle detail. So what exactly did Jesus Enrique Rosas, better known as the body language guy, see when he slowed the real video down frame by frame?
Endearing gesture and like a protective gesture, and some could say even a possessive gesture. I don't know what to tell you here, but I'm going to say, I'm going to tell you that there's a very good test. Maybe you have, doubts about this. Maybe you feel okay or not okay about this. Maybe you're a woman and you feel that you're okay with this, and this is no big deal. And just my question is that what would happen if another woman does this to your husband?
Spidey from the behavioral arts watched it too, frame by frame, at slow speed, and he noticed a few extra things that make the picture more complicated. He pointed out the timing. Erika's hand moves to JD's head almost immediately after the initial embrace, and that transition is what's unusual. Spidey flagged the micro-timing and the facial micro-expressions. JD's face shows a polite, slightly surprised stiffening, not relaxed pleasure. Erika's face looks like someone searching for comfort, but there's also a brief flash of something softer in her eyes. He said the combination, a protective feeling hand to the head plus that tiny facial flicker, is what a lot of viewers read as possessive or overly familiar. Spidey also compared it to dozens of other public hugs he studied. In usual professional or condolence hugs, hands stay on the back, shoulders, or upper arms. Moving to hair or the back of the head is rarer and reserved for much closer relationships. That's why people reacted so strongly when they saw the still photo. That frozen moment captured the less common placement of the hand, and our brains filled in a story. But even Spidey was careful to say this. None of these cues prove anything beyond a moment of odd intimacy. Body language can suggest patterns, tendencies, and likely emotions, but it doesn't read minds. Multiple experts in this case agreed on the same subtle red flag, the hand-to-head move, and that's worth paying attention to. It doesn't mean there was a secret affair. It means there was an unconventional, emotionally loaded gesture that, given the context, recent bereavement, a public stage, cameras everywhere, deserved more scrutiny than a viral still frame gave it. So what should we take away from all this? First, photos lie. A frozen frame can turn a 3-second hug into a headline. Second, experts don't panic at single gestures, but they do notice patterns, timing, micro-expressions, and where hands land, and those patterns influence how people interpret intent. Finally, even the professionals reminded viewers to be careful with assumptions. Grief, habit, or cultural norms can all shape touch in ways outsiders misread. At the end of the day, this whole story isn't just about a hug. It's about how the internet shapes narratives from fragments. A brief, loaded gesture became a conversation about boundaries, grief, and how we judge other people in public life. Joe Rogan noticed it, analysts noticed it, and now you've seen the breakdown. An unusual hand placement, a split-second facial reaction, and a viral photo that blew everything up. Take a breath before you share the next screenshot. Sometimes slowing the clip down gives you the whole truth.
The moment that she goes to hug him, we see her right shoulder move upwards like this into the hug. In his best-selling book, What Everybody Is Saying, former FBI agent and world-renowned interrogation and body language expert Joe Navarro, who's been on the channel before, talks a lot about gravity-defying gestures. This is any time where we see gestures in the body that move upwards while someone's communicating. And these are a very good sign of positive feelings. When we're feeling good, we go upwards with our body language. It's even in the language, right? I'm jumping for joy. I'm in heaven. I'm on cloud 9. Whereas with negative feelings, the opposite applies as well. And it's in the language once again. I'm feeling down, I'm feeling low, things close in downwards. And the research supports this.
Spidey noticed something very specific about Erika's movements. As she leaned into the hug, her right shoulder lifted, what he calls a gravity-defying gesture. According to him, when someone's shoulder moves like that, it signals genuine positive feelings. It shows you're fully immersed in the moment, emotionally engaged, not just going through the motions. But what really stood out to him was the hand on JD's head. This wasn't just a brief touch, it was full palm contact. Her entire hand rested on the back of his head. Spidey explained that this type of touch is usually reserved for very close relationships, intimate partners, close family, or situations where someone is emotionally comforting another person. It's not something you typically see in professional settings on a public stage, in front of cameras. So, at this point, we've got two experts noticing the same unusual physical cues. This wasn't your standard "good to see you" hug. Even in just a couple of seconds, there was more going on physically than most people realized. Now, let's flip the script and look at J.D. Vance's side of the interaction. After all, body language is a two-way street. The way he responded, even subtly, can tell us just as much about the dynamics of this moment.
Hand up, we see something with him. We see his right hand kind of tapping her like this on the back. It's not a rubbing, it's not a squeezing, it's this tap. So tapping in almost any scenario suggests more of a friendly relationship between two individuals. I don't even need to tell you this. Think about any hug where instead of holding the person like this, you're just kind of tapping. This is a very friendly kind of gesture. It does contrast in this case with the fact that his left hand is flat against her lower back. And I think what's happening here is he's noticing the way this hug might come off. J.D. Vance is quite aware of public opinion and what people think of him. He pays attention to it and he kind of responds in subtle ways. For example, just this Halloween, he chose to dress up as a meme of his that's circulating out there as a joke. And this kind of lets me know that although he can laugh about it, he's aware of the public and what they think.
Spidey also noticed some interesting things about how JD responded during the hug. First, he pointed out what he calls pelvic distancing. Basically, JD's lower body stayed slightly back. He wasn't leaning all the way in. His hips maintained distance, which is a subtle way of keeping boundaries. Then there were his hands. JD's right hand performed a small tapping motion on Erika's back. Now, a tap is very different from a rub or a squeeze. A tap is friendly, polite, but not intimate. It signals respect and keeps emotional distance, the kind of gesture you use when you want to acknowledge someone without getting too close physically. And here's the most telling part. JD was the first one to break the hug. He looked away first and created the separation himself. Spidey's interpretation? JD was aware of how this might look to others. He was managing the situation, keeping it professional, and signaling with his body. This is a brief, appropriate greeting. So what we have here is an interesting dynamic. Erika leaning in with gestures that could be seen as intimate, and JD responding with distancing moves, keeping everything polite and formal. At this point, we've heard from two male analysts, but a third expert weighed in, a female body language professional whose perspective added even more context to what was happening on stage.
Several requests to decode this video with Erika Kirk and J.D. Vance. Let's look at J.D. Vance's side of the hug first. He gives a tight hug with a pat on the back. So some people often pat people on the back. That's just kind of how they manage a longer hug. And for some people, that patting on the back is what they do to comfort someone else. He also rests his hands after the hug for a second on her waist area, which can be a sign of affection and or romantic interest. It's the move to slide her hands up and grasp and cradle his head that is getting so much attention. This is a move that we women do when we are in a deep kiss, which is why it looks so very intimate. Erika then ends her hug by grasping his shoulders, which is a sign of affection and closeness. That said, grief can do really wonky things to humans, but this is wonky for sure. I'm Annie Sarnblad and I teach microexpressions and all things
Annie Sarnblad, another body language specialist, focuses heavily on microexpressions, and when she watched this hug, she immediately noticed the hand movement. She made a point that really puts it into perspective. Sliding your hands up to grasp someone's head and hold it. That's a gesture women make during a deep, romantic kiss. The motion is almost identical. Even if nothing else is happening, our brains instantly recognize it as an intimate, romantic cue. That's why so many people watching this hug felt it looked too close or personal. Annie also noticed that after the hug, JD's hands briefly rested near Erika's waist. Hands in that area can suggest affection or even romantic interest, depending on context. She noted that grief can make people act in unusual ways, and losing someone might push behavior outside normal social rules. Still, she called the interaction wonky, which seems like a fair assessment considering the unusual gestures and timing. Now let's rewind to what Erika said before the hug, because this is where things get really interesting from a psychological perspective. She told the audience that nobody could replace her husband, but that JD reminded her a lot of him. Here's the key detail analysts picked up on. She didn't say, JD reminds me of Charlie. She said, JD reminds me of my husband. Do you see the difference? By framing it as my husband rather than naming Charlie, she automatically placed JD in a spousal context, rather than a professional or friendly one. Whether she intended it or not, that choice of words primes the audience to interpret the hug through a romantic lens. The verbal framing happened before any physical contact even occurred, setting the stage for how people perceive the gesture. And that's why, when the hug happened right afterward, viewers were already inclined to read it as more intimate than a standard professional greeting. And as you might expect, the public had a lot of opinions once this video went viral. The combination of unusual body language, timing, and pre-hug comments created a perfect storm for debate.
Way Erika Kirk hugged JD Vance on the stage the other night at that Turning Point event was given very cringy and very disrespectful. That is not the way you hug a married man. I don't care what nobody says. Y'all, in her speech, as she's introducing him, she says, and I quote, "No one will ever replace my husband, but JD Vance has a lot of similarities." And then when this man comes on stage, she literally gives him this very intimate and passionate hug, as though her hands are all in the back of his head. Baby, the only thing that was missing was the kiss to seal the deal. Do you hear me? And then when JD Vance gets on the stage and starts his speech, honey, I don't know if the man was soft launching his divorce or what. He sits up there and say how he hoped that his wife changed her religion to Christianity because of what? Because of what? So now you're saying you want a Christian woman like Erika? I don't know, y'all. I know this lady is a grieving widow and her husband just passed away and all this other stuff, but every time that lady open her mouth, she gets cringy, she gets more darker, her aura is off, she's just weird as hell. I don't know, y'all. What are your thoughts? What are your opinions? But that was crazy.
People online weren't holding back. One TikTok went viral, with someone calling the hug cringy and disrespectful. She said, "That's not how you hug a married man, period," and even joked that the only thing missing was a kiss to seal the deal. And honestly, a lot of people felt the same way. Comment sections were flooded with opinions saying the hug crossed a line, that it was inappropriate for a recent widow to be that physically affectionate with a married VP. But then something else happened that made viewers even more suspicious. Right after this event, JD Vance gave a speech where he mentioned that he hopes his wife, Usha, will eventually convert to Christianity. Now, that might have been a completely innocent comment about his personal beliefs, but the timing looked strange to a lot of people. You had this brief, seemingly intimate hug with another woman, and now he's publicly talking about his wife's faith. And as you can imagine, once the internet starts connecting dots, theories begin to fly. People filled in the gaps with their own interpretations, and that's when the story really went viral. And that's where Joe Rogan comes in. When he starts questioning something, millions of viewers pay attention, and suddenly, the conversation grows even bigger.
I don't necessarily think they know what's going on yet. There's a lot of weird shit going on with this.
I know.
First of all, there was that one guy who was the decoy. All right, so you got this guy who's an older guy who starts yelling out. Didn't he take his pants down? Took his pants down? This guy was at 9/11. He was at the Boston bombings.
All the hits.
He called in a fake bomb at another place. And then he did this at this thing. Right after, so somehow or another, this guy has the state of mind that the moment someone gets shot, he yells out and says, I did it, and takes his pants down or something like that. I don't know.
And a guy wrote, "This guy got what he deserved." No, he didn't. He had open debates. That takes courage. So if you didn't agree with them, you could come and speak. What's wrong?
On his podcast, Joe Rogan said there's a lot of weird stuff going on with the entire Charlie Kirk situation. And he wasn't just referring to the hug, he was talking about the bigger picture. Joe mentioned that there were reports of a man seen at the scene who some believe acted as a distraction or decoy. What caught his attention was that this same individual has supposedly appeared at other major incidents throughout the years. Joe found that pattern strange and worth questioning. His point was simple: things didn't seem to add up neatly. There were too many odd coincidences, too many small details that didn't fit together smoothly. And Joe, being who he is, wasn't afraid to say out loud that something about it all just felt off. Now, this isn't about pushing wild theories. It's about observation and asking questions. But when someone like Joe Rogan, with one of the biggest audiences in the world, openly says he's suspicious about a situation, people pay attention. It adds fuel to a fire that was already burning pretty hot online. So let's circle back to Jesus Enrique Roses for a moment, because he had some final thoughts that really helped put this entire controversy into perspective.
Let's say for a minute, Twilight Zone, hypothetical scenario. If Erika Kirk and JD Vance had an affair or something like that, let's make a Netflix special documentary about that. 6-part documentary. Do you really think they would be as obvious in front of everyone? Do you think that they would be a bit more careful being, I don't know, hypothetical scenario, of course. This is not happening. It's obviously not happening because they wouldn't have any sort of clue or showing any sort of clue out there. But again, this is it's outrageous how this has gotten out of control, and mainly this is this most important part, how these clickbaiters make sure to use only images to make their point about the hug between JD Vance and Erika Kirk. That is the sole reason. They are making sure to, have some kind of gotcha moment. Oh, this is inappropriate. And, in some way connect this that Erika had something to do with Charlie Kirk's assassination, which is even more outright.
Roses actually pushed back hard against some of the conspiracy theories floating around. He called it outrageous that people were suggesting this hug proved a secret affair. His reasoning? If anything inappropriate was really happening between these two, they wouldn't be hugging like that on stage, in front of cameras and hundreds of people. That would be incredibly careless. And these are not careless people. He explained that misleading images were fueling entire stories online, with clickbait driving the narrative more than the actual facts. But even Roses admitted that the hand on the head was unusual. He acknowledged it's a gesture that naturally makes people uncomfortable because it reads as intimate. His final takeaway was balanced. Is this proof of an affair? No. Is it unusual and worth discussing? Absolutely. And really, that's probably the fairest way to look at it. Maybe Erika was just seeking comfort. Maybe she didn't think about how it would look. Maybe JD was simply being kind to a grieving widow and the camera captured it at the wrong angle. Or maybe the experts are right, and this was objectively more intimate than it should have been. We can't know for sure. What we can say is this: body language doesn't lie. Your body shows what you're feeling, even when your words don't. According to 3 separate professionals, that brief hug displayed more warmth and intimacy than you'd normally expect between a recent widow and a married vice president. Add in Joe Rogan publicly questioning the case, and it's no wonder people are still talking about this. So, what do you think after hearing what the experts found? Was this just an awkward, overanalyzed moment blown out of proportion by a couple of photos? Are people reading too much into a simple political hug? Or did the body language professionals catch something real, something that showed the interaction was more intimate than it should have been? Either way, the discussion isn't going away anytime soon. And hey, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.